Aloha, and welcome everyone to this video convention resolution writing workshop for the Democratic Party of Hawaii and the Oahu County Democrats. Right? My name is Dr. William J. Puette. I am the parliamentarian for the Democratic Party of Hawaii and also for the Oahu County Democrats. And the purpose of this workshop is to run through the basic requirements and guidelines as well for composing writing resolutions as if you wish to submit them to the convention. And we're focusing primarily on the Oahu County Convention at this point, but much of this is going to apply equally to resolutions that would be submitted to the Democratic Parties of Hawaii's convention coming up, in biennial convention coming up in May. So let's get into it. A resolution. Just so you know, also a parliamentarian is once appointed, which I have been, is an advisor and consultant to the chair. So parliamentarians do not rule. Parliamentarians advise, and as much as possible try to help people follow the correct procedures as are laid out not just in Robert's rules, but in the organization's governing documents, which of course would be your constitution and bylaws for the state party and the bylaws for the Oahu County Democrats. So I have material in here that will refer to both as requirements go along. Any requirements that are in your bylaws supersede those that are in Roberts. Right? Moving right along. What is a resolution? Okay, so a resolution is pretty much the same thing as a main motion as it's usually understood in Roberts as well, but it's a more formal iteration of a main motion. And so Roberts, this is a quote from Roberts, 12th edition: "For more important or complex questions, or when greater formality is desired, a motion may be presented in the form of a resolution." Right, so you may be familiar with motions that begin, "I move that." Okay, resolutions just have a different format with "resolved that," as we'll see. Right? So in fact, I should actually go to, I'm sorry, I really wanted to just not have a little window on the side, so I'm going to go to that, okay? So, again, by definition, the resolution is one very long sentence, and that's something to understand. A lot of people don't. Okay, so from the beginning capital letter at the top of the resolution to the end of the resolution at the bottom, there should only be one period, and the whole thing is a single very long sentence. And its purpose is the same thing a motion would be, or main motion, that is to direct the organization to take a stand or engage in some action. It's directed to action to be taken by the organization, and not some other entity. It can also commend or take exception to actions of other entities. It must not provide direct instructions to any group other than the organization or its president and board of directors. So what that means is that resolutions that are going to come up at the Democratic Party's conventions have to be directed to that the Democratic Party. And if it's a convention of the Oahu County Democrats, then it should be direction to the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And that's how it should be written. If it's being submitted to the state convention, then the resolution is directed at the Democratic Party of Hawaii, not some other entity. A resolution or a long and complicated motion should be prepared in advance of the meeting, obviously, if possible, and should be put into writing before it is offered. So that's even a motion under Roberts supposed to have that, and that's specifically the case and often required by the rules of the organization for resolutions. Since the resolution is a main motion, all parliamentary rules relating to the main motion apply equally to a resolution. So things that you would do to a main motion in a regular meeting, those are like amend or postpone, or those types of things are going to be equally applicable to a resolution. A resolution may have two parts, and you're probably familiar with what's called the preamble. Maybe you may not recognize the name, all right? But the two parts of a resolution are the preamble and the actual resolved clauses, or the resolution itself. There may be several preamble clauses. Right? The preamble clauses are those clauses that usually begin with the word whereas. Right? So in an elaborate resolution, you may have several. Right? Or the resolution actually may be as simple as a motion using the words resolved instead of I move. A preamble is not required. So it is possible to actually do a resolution with no whereas clauses, is what we're saying here. A preamble is not required. The actions or other recommendations are contained in the resolves at the close of the resolution. Right? It is usually inadvisable, according to Roberts, to attempt to include reasons for a motion's adoption within the motion itself. Right? So this is a little bit dangerous because there may be a confusion about what's in a whereas clause as opposed to what is appropriate to debate when the resolution is being considered. Right? So, that requires some, I think, careful consideration. Language in the preamble or the whereas clauses is non-binding. That's the first thing. Nothing should be in a preamble or a whereas clause that you expect is going to have any force and effect on the organization if they adopt the resolution. The preamble is only for information, right? That little known, it says over here, cases where it provides little known information without which the point of the merits of a resolution are likely to be poorly understood. But you should not be trying to type it into each resolution clause, essentially your argument or your debate. Right? So, or again, when unusual importance is attached to making certain reasons, but that's very dangerous. And as Robert says, it can be dangerous because people may agree with your resolution but disagree with your whereas clauses. It could have a negative impact on adopting that. So as we'll see, the focus of writing should be on the resolved clauses, not on the whereas or preamble clauses. Lengthy or elaborate reasons for a motion's adoption should not be included in the motion itself. Members may agree with the proposed action, but they not vote for it because of things that they're unhappy with as expressed in the preamble. Any reasons given within the body of an ordinary motion may be considered debate and would not be in order. So that's why it could arguably say that some of those whereas clauses are really should be excised or should be deleted in some way or another if they are taking the place of debate. Debate properly belongs in the deliberation before the assembly, not in a whereas clause. And I like to always use this illustration because the most famous resolution in the American history was the Lee Resolution of 1776, the one which, once adopted, declared our independence from Great Britain. And so this is an actual copy, from the archives of the Lee Resolution. And actually, historically, it was more common for groups in these days, in earlier centuries, to all their main motions were in the form of resolutions. So they began, and that first word often on the left, sort of by itself, is the word resolved, right? And you notice then they separate, and then they begin the resolution with the word that. Okay, and in this case, it says these colonies. To begin with, they inserted these united colonies, and so forth. It goes to declare the independence and absolved from all allegiance to Great Britain. And adoption of that resolution was what was our real Declaration of Independence. What we think of as a Declaration of Independence was a separate document to explain why they adopted this one. All right. So, and again, no whereas clauses, sort of the point of that. Oops, sorry. So resolution, punctuation, and layout. you don't apply normal rules of grammar that you would get in an English class. You know, I used to teach English, so I'm particularly aware of this, because there is a unique grammar specific to resolutions. And if Roberts is your parliamentary authority, that's what you're supposed to use, unless you develop something else and put it into your bylaws, or in some cases into special rules. But because we don't have things like that, the assumption is you're going to follow the rules that are provided for in Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And these do not look like a lot of the resolutions that come out of our legislative bodies, which have their own style and format. So you need to follow this style and format, despite anything that you may have seen as an example coming out of legislative groups or assemblies, like our, whether it be federal or our state House and Senate. So what are the rules? Begin each preamble paragraph with the word whereas, okay, followed by a comma. And the next word begins with a capital letter. Right? So there you have it, all right? And the preamble, even if it contains several paragraphs, may not contain a period. Close each preamble paragraph with a semicolon, followed by the word and, so that it moves along into, as the resolution goes along. These are all, you can see the citations from Robert's Rules of Order, which that is what RO&R refers to, 12th edition, and section 10, in this case, paragraph 21, right? Then at the end, close the last preamble paragraph with a semicolon, after which use the connecting phrase, therefore be it, or now therefore be it. No punctuation follows that. And it should be placed only at the end of the last preamble clause. So a lot of people think that resolutions begin with, be it, or therefore be it. No, resolutions do not begin with that. And the resolving clauses do not begin with that. That language is at the end of the preamble, right? So that's how that works. And we'll show you an example of this. And again, they're posted on the Oahu County Democrat site is a template. So you can sort of see how this works. A single page gives a good, I think, example. And I'll show this in another slide. So here is sort of a quick, easy look at this. So for instance, the preamble would have whereas, comma, capital letter, the, and then the preamble text, and semicolon, and, whereas, the, or anything else that you might, doesn't have to begin with the, but it does have to begin with a capital letter, okay? And then the last one would be whereas, the, looks just like the others, except now because it's going to introduce the resolution part of the resolved clauses, you have the language now be it, or now therefore be it. One thing you should not do according to Roberts, and again, this is not what you see in a lot of legislative things and what people are used to, is you do not use all capital letters for the title or the words whereas, resolved, or ordered. All right, so you see here, you use regular ordinary case for this, whereas, only the first letter W is capitalized. It's not supposed to be all caps, all right? But remember there's a comma and that the next word begins with a capital letter. And then that particular preamble clause should stop with a semicolon, no periods. So in the resolution itself, print the word resolved, okay, at the beginning of each of the, just like you saw in the Lee resolution, in italics, followed by a comma and the word that. So instead of whereas and a comma and a capital letter of whatever you're going to do, we really want exactly this phraseology: resolved, comma, that. And the word resolved should be italicized. All right. So begins with a capital T, that. All right. Begin each resolving clause this way. And when there is to be more than one resolving clause, you can close each except the last resolving clause with a semicolon, followed by the phrase and be it, or and be it further, right? Whatever. but no punctuation at the end of that, right? Only the last resolving clause will conclude the resolution with a period, right? So the whole thing is one very long sentence. And here you have, again, quick look at how this would be laid out. Whereas, in the preamble, and then the last resolving clause, or excuse me, of the preamble, not resolving clause, preamble clause would say after the semicolon, now therefore be it. And then each of the resolving clauses begins with the word resolved in italics, comma, that. All right. And that's standard. This is what Roberts says is the correct way for formatting a resolution. All right. So, and once again, a couple of different examples. Now you can say and between the two whereases or the different whereases, as long as the last one has, now therefore be it or something like that. And then the resolve clauses, again, if you have more than one, you can say after the first resolved clause and be it. And then after the second resolved clause and be it. Or you could say and be it further. But you notice after those, at the end of those clauses, after the semicolon in that language, like and be it and or now therefore be it, there's no punctuation at the end, right? It goes just down spacing to the next clause. So the other thing you should be aware of is that a lot of times you will have a resolution that at the end, and we'll talk about this very common form for our Democratic Party resolutions, that there will be instructions to staff or employees at the very end. The last resolution will, a resolving clause, will instead of saying resolve that, you can say if this is directions, and it can only work if this is instructions to your staff, or in other words, the party secretary or executive director or somebody who's going to be implementing these. Then you can say, be it, it'll say in a previous resolving clause, ordered, okay, ordered instead of the word resolved. But like the word resolved, it will be in italics, comma, again, and capital letter that. Right. So you can find all of this stuff again in the 12th edition of Robert's Rules of Order in section 10. And this is pretty much the same as it has been for decades. So if you have even the 11th edition, you'll find pretty much the same language. But this is the current edition, and we like to refer to the current edition. A resolution. A couple other things about resolutions here, right? A resolution is improper if it implies the truth of specific rumors or contains insinuations unfavorable to an officer or member, even one who is to be accused. And you can begin a disciplinary charge by asking that the resolution resolve that the resolution or resolve that the party will initiate a disciplinary charge. And that disciplinary charge is not the same thing. So you can't just go into what we're saying here. Don't go into a convention with people you don't like on a hit list and create resolutions that smacks them around a little bit. In other words, that would be all improper. Right, and seen that happen, unfortunately, and it would have to be, I would advise the chair to rule such a resolution out of order. A resolution submitted that is substantially the same or in conflict with a motion previously adopted will be ruled out of order also. This is the advice that I have on that parliamentary advisory that's also posted on the site. Because under Roberts, once a resolution is adopted, there is no sunset on it. It does not go away. It remains in full force and effect until it has another resolution is offered later on at another session to rescind the former resolution or amend it. And if that's the case, then you would probably need a preamble clause that indicates that this is the resolution the way it was, and now therefore be it resolved that that resolution be rescinded, right? So, or amended. Motions are out of order if they conflict with a motion that has been adopted by the society and has neither been rescinded nor reconsidered and rejected after adoption. And that's, you see that specifically stated in the Robert's Rules of Order, 12th edition, section 39, paragraph 5. Reintroduction of a motion or resolution substantially the same as, oh, I got that one. Okay. Oh yeah. Also, the word reaffirm. So sometimes people will say, well, this has been our position, but it's so long been our position. Maybe we need to put a resolution in to say, and we're reaffirming this or reaffirming this. So again, Roberts tells us that motions to reaffirm a position previously taken by adopting a motion or resolution are not in order. Such a motion serves no useful purpose because the original motion is still in effect, right? They don't get sunsetted unless they say so within the body of the resolution. So this similar language is going to be found in the Constitution of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, Article 8, Section 7A. Says that resolving clauses of resolutions, except for those clauses that refer to a specific date, event, or legislative session, once adopted by delegates at a convention of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, shall represent the official policies of the party and shall remain in force and effect until rescinded or amended by the delegates at an annual or special convention. Right? So you'll notice this is not something that, according to this, the SCC, the State Central Committee, can go in and rescind later on if it's been adopted at a convention. Only convention can undo it. Likewise, there is language in the Oahu County bylaws in section 13.3 that says the same thing, that such resolutions at convention remain in force and effect until rescinded or amended by a 2/3 roll call vote of the full membership of the Oahu County Committee. So now the committee can possibly do that, but it would be a 2/3 roll call vote of the entire committee. And so that's one little way that you could possibly get rid of, but you can only get rid there of a resolution that was passed by the Oahu County Committee at convention. And recently, in the last convention, the language was added to put a sunset of 10 years from the date of adoption, but I don't think that even goes into effect for this convention. It goes into effect, if I recall, in June. So henceforward, we will only record the resolutions that are within that 10-year period. So also, section 12.12 of the bylaws of the Oahu County Democrats provides that in even-numbered years of the county's annual convention, it shall be limited to resolutions addressing statewide, national, or international policies that can be proposed to the delegates of the DPH biennial convention. So the thinking here is once the resolutions we're going to take up at the even-numbered years conventions are going to go automatically one way or the other, or at least can go automatically to the state biennial convention after they've been slightly reworded, of course, to reflect that they would then be resolutions of the biennial convention or of the state party on behalf. So that's how that works. In other words, it will be inappropriate this year to take up resolutions that are not of addressing a statewide, national, or international policy, right? That would go forward. Issues that relate specifically to Oahu County are not, according to our bylaws, going to be in order and would be probably ruled out of order as such. Oahu County Democrats resolutions. So how do you, one of the understandings is that, and the committee that's in charge of resolutions, as well as hopefully people who compose them, have a responsibility to find out what the previous resolutions were all about. So there is a page on our public website that has resolutions. You click on that and you'll see basically what that screenshot is showing there. And you can search. So if you have a resolution in mind and you want to find out if there is already a resolution that that applies to this, then you should do your homework on this and not just compose resolutions in a vacuum. Right. So use the search box to check for any previous resolution that may duplicate or conflict with your proposed resolution. And if you want to write a resolution that does, for instance, conflict, or you would like to change a little bit, then you could offer a motion that either rescinds or amends that previous resolution, but that's what it would have to say in the resolved clauses. And also check the state party website. Remember, we're talking about, in this case, even numbered your convention. These are going to be the types of resolutions that will be introduced at the biennial convention. So likewise, on the state website, there are summaries and lists of resolutions that were passed in previous conventions. And that's how that works. Okay. Now, resolutions that came out of a state central committee are a little trickier because they're not the same as convention resolutions. But if you want to take a resolution that was done by the state central committee, again, you could change it or rescind it, I suppose, but that it should say that in the resolution, and it should refer to the specific resolution that was, and you can find all the stuff that's searchable on the state party website. So this is the example I was telling you about, and a copy of a PDF copy of this sample is posted on the Oahu County Democratic Party website. So you can see that this is the correct format. And I have those little footnotes involved, and in the full PDF, each one of those has explanatory, but most of the explanations are the things I just am presenting here. So you see the whereas, and in the first one, how that works. The second whereas begins with the word many after whereas, so you just capitalize that, right? And sometimes it does, whatever word it begins with, the whereas, that has to be capitalized after the word whereas and a comma, right? And no periods at the end of anything. These whereas clauses are separated by semicolons. You can see that, right? And then you get down to the last of the whereas clauses. Hawaii workers and their dependents require health care during periods when they are unemployed. So then you have the semicolon there, and now therefore be it, right? No punctuation after that, and you go to your actual resolve clause. Resolve clause, that Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, and that is really what should appear. That language should be pretty much used for all of the resolutions that are coming forward. You go directly to the fact this is being directed to Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And if they're if such a resolution is adopted by the state at the biennial convention, the state biennial convention, to be sent forward for that purpose, it would be rewritten to say, as a matter of something to be presented at the state convention, would you take out the Oahu County Democrats? Then it becomes resolved that the Democratic Party of Hawaii. And so, but you can't do it that way to begin with, because you can only speak for the Oahu County Democrats at the Oahu County Democratic Party convention. And then you see the example of the ordered, right? And this is real common, that you're going to have people who will want to have copies going to all of these different people. The copies of this resolution be transmitted to the members of the Hawaii Congressional Delegation. These are not required. You can decide, and sometimes it's inappropriate to send it to people who you may think are in it, from this list, for instance, right? But in an even numbered year, because the intention would be that this is then presented as a resolution or a proposed resolution at the biennial convention, then you notice that the last one there, right, after who are members of the Democratic, the last one in the last line, full line, begins, and the 2022 Convention Resolutions Committee of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. That's your transmission to send it over to the Resolutions Committee that will be looking at resolutions coming from the different counties. So that may be something, at the very least, if that's your plan and it does this statewide, national, international concern, then that should probably be added into that, as well as at the final signature by the maker and the second, who have to be Democrats who are on Oahu and live in Oahu. So they're the people who have the right at this point. In previous years, we used to require that this be supported by several people, or a list, and we would have a long list of sometimes 10 people required to endorse this before it would go forward. But current rules allow this to be done with just a maker and a second. right? And that's how that should be written. I also want to draw your attention, I think I'll talk about it again later, but when you get to that issue about copies, please do not say certified copies, because certification is nothing that we do. And so it kind of refers to the old days when you had one of those notary type stamps, and it could have been done on parchment or whatever else, or special paper. We don't do that anymore. In all likelihood, the copies of the resolution will be transmitted by email, right? And it's presumed that they're correct and true. So an additional signature by a secretary saying this is a correct and true version, which is what certification would say, is not necessary, and will only delay any kind of copy that you want to have sent abroad. So avoid attempting to add in certified copies. Okay. The other thing for punctuation and layout, this is not Robert's, but this is the policy of the party, is that you should use the correct Hawaiian version of names and words. So if you have a Hawaiian name or word in there, take care that you add the okina and the kahako, and it has to be done properly. You notice that the okina is, if you look at that, it's not an apostrophe. So don't confuse it with an apostrophe. The okina faces the other direction. It looks like a little miniature 6 rather than a 9. Right? So you have to take care. And if you're a resolutions committee, you may need to correct those if people don't know how to do this. So for instance, you see the names Hawaii, Oahu, Kauai. That's how the okina is supposed to look. It is not an apostrophe. So it can be made by the left single quotation mark, and then you just pull the space out. It's a pretty easy thing to do in almost all word programs and that are out there. For Oahu County resolutions, the first words after the word resolved should be that the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii, as you saw in the example. Right? So don't put in things like by the Oahu County Democratic Party. This is not the Oahu County Democratic Party, right? The bylaws and constitution of the state call us, the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We're not a separate party from the state party, Democratic Party of Hawaii. And therefore it is incorrect to use that name or to change it in some way or another to an entity that does not exist, right? So, or any other entity, okay? So you wouldn't begin by saying resolve that the state legislature do something, because we can only speak for the Oahu County Democrats. You can say resolve that the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii urge the legislature, for instance, to adopt this, whatever else it is, but you don't have it directed directly to some other entity besides Oahu County Democratic Party, if it's a county resolution. For state convention resolutions, the first words then would instead be resolved, and then that the Democratic Party of Hawaii, right? Not some other entity that's not under the control, right? County resolutions need to be revised, therefore, as you see in the note, to change the resolved clauses to state DPH language before they're submitted to the State Rules Committee, or Resolutions Committee, excuse me. So, and as I mentioned already, instead of resolve, transmission directions can be, you use the word ordered. Do not stipulate that this copies be certified. That's just so you make sure you understand that. And in odd numbered years, do not add to the transmission order that copies be sent to the State Convention Resolutions Committee, because in our odd numbered years of our conventions, the resolutions deal with whatever you pass are not going to be transferable. They're too far in advance of the biennial convention, and the rules for the party and for the resolutions committee have continuously and regularly made it clear that they will not accept resolutions that came out of the party conventions, except for the resolutions that come out of the county conventions in the same year as the biennial convention to which they apply. So don't even put that transmission language if this was an odd year convention. Convention resolutions, platform and rules committees shall have the power to format edit, combine resolutions of a similar substance, and make substantive amendments that do not alter the intent of any amendments. For instance, if it's and to the platform and rules and resolving clauses of resolutions. And this applies not just to the resolutions committee, but you can see it's directed to the power or authority of the convention committees. And that's something that is found, as you can see there, in our the standing rules that were adopted for convention committees, right? Rule 2.4, and approved by the OCC on January 8th. Punctuation and layout. Section 13.5 of the bylaws of the Oahu County also provides that convention resolutions may be edited and reformatted by the secretary as needed to correct spelling and grammar and to conform with the convention submission rules. So this is basically saying if for some reason something slips by that we miss, then at the end, before it gets sent along or posted, the secretary will correct these things to follow the format described in Robert's Rules of Order to Revise, which I've just been going through with you. So for instance, sometimes this is not really an exercise, but it gives you an idea. When you write any main motion, right, as well as certainly a resolution that's going to delegates at a convention, write as concisely as possible. All right, this is an example of bad writing, as you can see. First it puts the be it in front of the word resolved. The word resolved is all capitalized. It shouldn't be. It's not italicized. So there's all these different things. And you don't write this kind of silly language in there, by this august body. What does that mean anyway? We already said what should immediately, it should be resolved, that the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. So try to avoid that kind of really pretentious sounding language that you may have seen in other resolutions which were not properly written in the first place. Right? So, and also we see an example of, this is not really clear what this is actually resolving. Right. In this case, it's resolving. The word that should have been capitalized, and that should have come right after the word resolve, that the state government, and then what does this really get behind the university, man, and give it all the money you need? No, all right. This is a very poorly written, and if a committee gets this, I would recommend the committees contact the maker and try to work with them to see if you can get this into better form before submitting this any further along the line. So, this is a slightly better version of this. I personally think it's just, so resolve that the Oahu County Democrats of the Democratic Party of Hawaii support and endorse restoration of funds cut from the budget of the University of Hawaii. So, all right, now it's a lot more specific. You could probably even be more specific than that, but instead of really get behind, right? So let's be careful how we write things, right? And the submissions for the 2022 convention of the county, which is, of course, the Oahu County Democrats, not the Oahu County Committee. Our committee does not, the Oahu County Committee does not have a convention. The Oahu County Democrats have a convention. So Oahu County Democrats email there for resolutions, as you see, resolutions. It's also on the website in several different places, and it's in the standing rules. So, and looking at the convention standing rules, again, this information is all provided. So this is just a quick summary that the deadline is February 21st. And it's supposed to be a one-page resolution. Do not submit resolutions that have 2 or 3 pages and that are not written in this format. The purpose here is actually to limit the number of whereas clauses, because I've seen people take an essay that they read someplace and try to put the word whereas in the beginning of every sentence and lay it out like it was a resolution. And that's generally silly and it's a practice much to be discouraged. So, but it is too much to ask anybody to read through pages and pages and pages of whereas clauses, and which will probably, in any event, be out of order because they're attempting to articulate debate rather than what is the proper content for a preamble or a whereas clause. So the committee is most likely, if they get a multi-page resolution, to start, we'll talk to the maker. I advise them to call the maker and say, okay, we're going to excise some of these preamble clauses to the main thing is the resolution. So let's get to the resolves clauses. So not to exceed 1 page, 8.5 by 11. Now we're saying Times New Roman, whereas in the past we might have considered Arial, but we're going to comply with the font requirements that are in the national or the state party standing rules, which is Times New Roman and 12 font, 12-point font, still 1 inch margins. So, and for more detail, you can look at the convention standing rules, which are posted. So I would only add that email submissions should include the following information. And this is right out of the convention standing rules. So, I mean, I can sit here and read it for you, and you'll see again, it says the deadline is February 21st there at the end of this section of Rule 5 about how you do these submissions for the different committees. So follow that advice. Also, the Resolutions Committee will accept and consider resolutions that relate to statewide, national, or international policies that can be proposed to the delegates of the Democratic Party of Hawaii Biennial Convention on behalf of Oahu County Democrats. So resolutions submitted in the prescribed format by the deadline will be accepted and evaluated based on the following criteria. So this is all laid out, and this is nothing new. This has been in previous standing rules. So they will accept things that are submitted by elected officials who are Democrats that are aligned with the OCC's Oahu County's Democrats or Oahu County Committee's 5 legislative priorities: affordable housing, public education, healthcare, climate change, and economic inequality. So those are going to be the priorities. They can originate from a standing committee of the county committee of the OCC. Resolutions thanking a person or organization external to the OCC for supporting the work of the OCC are often called courtesy resolutions, or we have sometimes also a memorial resolution for somebody who's passed away to honor their contributions to the party in their life. So, you cannot submit one that calls for censure, right? Because that's a disciplinary action, and there's a whole nother procedure laid out in the Constitution and bylaws about how disciplines have to be handled, and censure is considered a discipline. So avoid that. Okay. All submissions must be supported by another member as a second, which must be verified by a separate email to the respective committee. So that's the way you get the second, saying, yes, I second this resolution. Submissions not recommended by the designated convention committee must be included in the report, but shall only be considered at convention after all the recommended proposals have been considered, and only if a 2/3 vote of the delegates approves of consideration. The motion to consider a proposal not recommended by the designated committee shall be undebatable. So first, there's a preliminary vote, either going to consider it or not consider it without debate, and only if it passes that vote will it be taken up and debated. No floor submissions will be considered on the day of the e-convention, except for conceivably a courtesy resolution if somebody, at the last minute passes away or some other reason that we want to do that, and that would be at the discretion of the chair. Okay, well, that's the conclusion of my presentation, and I thank you for your patience, and I hope this will help you as you prepare your resolutions, and I also hope that it will help the deliberations of the resolutions committee. Aloha, and thank you very much